Protect your DNA. BioPQQ can promote formation of new mitochondria. Infowarsstore.com.
Welcome back. Joining me now are Michael Straumietis. Is that
Very
it?
good.
Okay, close enough, but
Close
we call
enough.
him Big
Close
Mike, and we will do that
Thank
from
you.
here on out. And Kevin Booth, a filmmaker who is no stranger to the Alex Jones audience. We have a wide range of topics to talk about here, everything from drug legalization to what's going on in Bulgaria. Politics there, and we're going to break this into two segments. But first, let's talk about the drug issues. And of course, Kevin Booth is very well known to people for American Drug War back in 2007. Classic picture on the cover of that movie, the Iwo Jima takeoff, where you've got SWAT team instead of Marines planting a rolled up dollar bill or $100 bill into a mountain of cocaine. Yep. Exactly, because that's what it's about. It's the war on drugs, exposing that. You follow that up with a documentary in 2010, How Weed Won the West.
Yes, sir.
And in that, you're talking about the legalization that is happening. That was at the forefront of legalization happening. I assume that's where the two of you met, because you've been involved in that from the very beginning. And then American Drug War II in 2013. And now you're working on a documentary that has gotten you involved in the political aspects of some of this in Bulgaria. And we're going to be talking about that in the next segment. But first, I want to talk about what you've been doing, Big Mike. Now, you've been, you said from the day one, you've been talking about how these fertilizers and nutrients that you give people for growing things, you haven't been hiding the fact that this is for cannabis.
Yeah, at 23 years old, I grew my first marijuana crop. It was a failure. I fell in love with the plant, and at one point, I was starting to take fertilizer from other companies and making them better, and gave it to a few friends, and they tried it. They said, you should be selling this stuff. And so we did. In 2000, started the company, and never hid the fact that these products were specifically made for cannabis. And I did a lot of tissue samples over many different strains, find out what that plant utilizes during the various stages of its growth.
Very interesting, because that's the sort of thing that we have seen happen with prohibition. When they come in and they prohibit something, like we saw with alcohol prohibition, what you wound up with were, in many cases, much more concentrated forms of alcohol than they had before. So it was counterproductive in that way, but especially counterproductive in terms of trying to control people's behavior, trying to keep a government that doesn't flow into corruption, okay? And that's what we saw with alcohol prohibition. And so there's all these different, it does exactly the opposite. People who want to cut down the use of marijuana for whatever reason, and we can talk about the real uses of marijuana, but when they want to cut down on the use of marijuana, when they want to cut down on the use of alcohol, by making prohibition, not only do they corrupt the government, not only do they destroy the Constitution and individual liberty, but they get exactly the opposite effect. That's why I tell many people, if you want to see guns explode on the streets with all kinds of new innovations, just do gun prohibition. You're going to see it explode.
I mean, Mike is basically a product of the government putting the genie in the bottle. You get guys like Mike who are like smarter than the government and are going to figure out ways to make things better. And it's just funny. It's the ultimate irony, I believe, on these drug warriors, that now, like, the government now is just going to have to catch up to where all these other people are, like Mike, because they have just sat on this thing like it's this horrible illegal substance, while everybody else is racing forward with the technology and the science of it.
And that applies all the way across the board. And really, because of drug prohibition, you've wound up with things that are really harmful, like meth, for example, that come in. And instead of having, just like with alcohol prohibition, most people were involved with beer or wine, then they went to hard liquor, or they went to things that were made in bathtubs that were making people go blind. So you had that kind of unintended consequences, shall we say. Maybe many of us would say it's maybe not unintended, okay? But in Texas, I thought it was very interesting, because my background is I'm a pretty straight guy, okay? I don't drink, I have never done pot or anything, but I am vehemently opposed to prohibition. And so I want to talk to the people out there who are afraid of this, because over and over again, I see on the right, we see people who are afraid of pot or other drugs, and they just want the government to come in with an iron fist and stop it, because I'm afraid of it. I don't care what you have to do to the country. I don't care what you have to do to the people. Just stop this, okay? Take away our freedoms, but make us safe from this thing we fear. And on the left, I see the same thing with guns. And yet we had a thing here in Texas just recently. We had our very first crack in marijuana prohibition here in Texas. And it was because of a representative who is a conservative Christian libertarian, David Simpson. This is what he said. He said, I don't believe that when God made marijuana, he made a mistake that government needs to fix. In the name of protecting the public, certain substances have been declared evil and contraband. So evil are these substances that state and federal agents are empowered to enforce laws with little or no regard for constitutional protection of individual rights, the sanctity of one's home, or the right to travel freely.
That's practically a Bill Hicks quote, by the way.
I've
never heard that.
Is it really?
Well,
he's a very conservative.
From Bill Hicks, yeah.
David Simpson is a very conservative, straight-up cowboy, and he introduced a bill that would remove marijuana from the entire criminal code.
Nice.
Now, that did not go through, but one of the things that he was talking about in this was the fact that he knew several patients in his jurisdiction who had children who had uncontrollable seizures. The only way they could control it was with marijuana. Okay.
Yep.
And so what he wound up getting, they did not take his approach and remove marijuana out of the legal code, but they did carve in an exception for children who have that particular condition. And it's interesting, I find, that most of these conditions are coming as adverse reactions to vaccines. That's another topic we won't get into.
Another irony.
Okay, yeah. Exactly. However, now you have marijuana exemption for this one particular condition, yet they still have it in as a Schedule I drug.
Yeah, here. So you're talking here in Texas. It's a medical marijuana state. They allow CBD only oil with no narcotic effect. Here's the bad part about this law. What they put in, you must try 2 other prescription drugs from Big Pharma first before you go and give medical marijuana a try, and you have to have 2 doctors write the prescription. So the barrier to entry is extremely high, and patients are suffering because of this. But it's good to see that the door is open for CBD, because now that door is open, it's going to be leave an opportunity for a bigger and more in-depth discussion later on. And eventually, you'll see that medical marijuana will become a reality here in Texas. Texas is not going to allow all these other states to have this industry, and they're not going to be a part of it. Come on, there's large tax dollars, a lot of money at stake here.
That's part of it as well.
Yeah. I mean, one thing I would say to your audience of conservatives, and that is, your children are most likely going to try marijuana, whether you like it or not. You're not going to stop it. They're going to do it. The question is, do you want them to smoke marijuana that came from a Mexican cartel?
Yeah.
Or do you want them to smoke marijuana that's been tested in laboratories, grown by nutrients, by a guy who spent his whole life like hiring PhDs to figure out this thing? Because those are your choices.
With paraquat.
Yeah, those are your choices.
And by the way, in the black market, they use pesticides when they're growing marijuana that are harmful.
Yes.
And so we need to regulate this as soon as possible, because patient safety is paramount.
And the American government going down and using paraquat and other herbicides and things like that.
Another chapter, another chapter in our history that's just awful.
Well, I find it interesting. This is another thing conservatives don't understand, and that is the war on drugs is really a UN agenda. The schedules and everything were created by the UN 10 years before Richard Nixon declared the war on drugs and implemented verbatim this UN agenda with the schedules, okay, and having all the drugs under these schedules. It's a worldwide agenda. I would think that many conservatives and libertarians would be concerned about that aspect of the fact, as well as the fact that there's nothing in the Constitution that gives them the authority to do this. We had 2 amendments for alcohol prohibition, one to grant them the power to prohibit this because they don't have that under the Constitution, and the next one to remove that. Where's the amendment for marijuana or any of these other substances that they prohibit?
And more people die every year off Tylenol and cold pills.
Prescription drugs.
But just even over the counter, not even prescription, even just over the counter pills as compared to marijuana, which nobody dies. Nope. And so, the argument becomes, people think like, well, if we legalize it, all the kids are going to start smoking it. That's the argument.
Well, that's not, that's totally false. You take the Netherlands, for example, and other countries where they have allowed marijuana to be tolerated or part of their culture, the usage of teens actually goes down. There are less drug overdoses and less crime.
Yeah, and we've seen
this even in Colorado. They call it the Colorado experiment. Well, the Colorado experiment is working extremely well.
And we've seen the Mexican drug cartels taking a hit on their marijuana sales, plummeting after it became legalized. We've got to take a quick break, and we're going to be back in just a few minutes. And we're going to talk in the next segment about what's going on in Bulgaria, massive political issues, as well as issues that would relate to our election here. We're going to talk to someone who is an expert on electronic voting in Bulgaria, as well as an expert on the kind of corruption you would get with that kind of society. We'll be right back with Kevin Booth, Big Mike, and Ivan Georgiev.
Brain Force is here. Ladies and gentlemen, I've been on this the last few months. You probably noticed I've been more crazed, more focused, less brain fog, more energy, more special reports, and it's because of Brain Force.
One of the worst things with most energy products is it's not sustainable, right? You're gonna crash, you're gonna feel really bad afterwards. This has a bunch of different antioxidants and compounds and polyphenols.
Everybody's on these drugs to knock their brain out because the brain's so fried.
We kept changing this formula over and over and over again until it became sort of a grand puzzle. For example, the L-theanine inside of it, that is activated by the different compounds in the yerba mate that we put inside of it as well. This just increases the compounds you already have.
This is what you're actually designed to run on.
Exactly.
It's kind of like a car will run on one form of junkie gas, but it runs really good on what it's designed for. You will find Brain Force, Survival Shield X2, and other game-changing products at InfoWarsLife.com or call 888-253-3139.
Joining us now is Ivan Georgiev, and he is from Bulgaria. We're going to talk to him. He's an entrepreneur, founder of a tech startup company. He's spent the last 3 years trying to overthrow the authoritarian regime in Bulgaria, as he would describe it, as a mafia regime. And of course, we've been talking to Kevin Booth, filmmaker, and Big Mike, Michael Straumietis, who has been telling us about his efforts to work with legalized marijuana, especially medical marijuana. And as we were ending the last segment, we were talking about some of the things that medical marijuana has been used for. Again, in Texas, they've only acknowledged one use of it, but there are so many glaucoma. And I remember looking this up when my wife had glaucoma, and we saw the different treatments that were out there from the American Ophthalmology Society and all the horrendous side effects of the pharmaceutical drugs that were out there. And then they had marijuana, and they said, well, the side effects are euphoria and increased appetite. And the downside of this is that you may underdose because we don't really know how much this is. And it's like, what kind of insanity is this?
You know, it reduces intraocular eye pressure, and I've had 3 corneal transplants, and I actually went into my doctor and tested it. Like, I smoked, went in, my pressure readings were 9 and 10, which is like really like stellar. And then the next time I visited, I didn't do that, and I was at 18 and 24, which was borderline. 24 is borderline glaucoma, so you know, it does work.
Well, it's amazing. And as we were talking during the break, if you allow the government to prohibit medicine that you can take, then it isn't very long before you see the government forcing medication on you, as we see with forced vaccinations, taking away our informed consent, because they've already taken away our informed consent in terms of allowing us to take medication. Even if you want to take pharmaceuticals, they have established that the FDA, if you've got a life-threatening disease, you want to treat it with pharmaceutical drugs, you still have to get their permission. Wait for them to go through the testing procedure. So you don't own yourself. You are essentially their kept slave. You have no informed consent. They can force anything on to you, or they can withhold anything from you. That's the principle.
Well, I think for all your conservative doubters out there, just Google the 2003 patent for cannabinoids taken out by our own Department of Health and Human Services as a anti-inflammatory and a neuroprotectant. Mm-hmm. And meanwhile, the FDA is releasing press releases saying there's no medical benefit, while the government is actually trying to capitalize on its medical benefit because they see the genie's coming out of the bottle, and they've been on the wrong side of this thing the whole time.
Exactly. That's the money side of it. Just as we saw in Ohio, they wanted to try to legalize it but keep it as a monopoly. They think that if they want to monopolize things with pharmaceutical industry. That's why they came around with marijuana prohibition.
Most people don't realize that we have something called an endocannabinoid system. Our body is wired for weed, literally is. Heidelberg and Hamburg universities in Germany just came out with a study that runner's high is not endorphins being released, rather cannabinoids being released in our body. Mm-hmm. And so here, you know, people for thousands of years have been using cannabis as medicine. And it's time, and the time has finally come, and I'm glad to see it, that America's government, they're finally waking up and realizing how important this drug is to the health of everyone in this country, in fact, the world.
Now, Big Mike, you said that from day one you've been creating products to help people more efficiently grow marijuana. You were doing it in Canada. As I said, how did you do that without getting shut down by the DEA? Then you moved to Eastern Europe. And tell us about that.
Correct. So we started out in Canada, and it was 2001, medical marijuana became a reality in Canada. We knew the writing was on the wall for medical marijuana, and well, first of all, I've been growing for 33 years. So I started this in the year 2000. I was already an activist at that time. And so it was just natural for us to say, this is specifically for cannabis. And doing so, realize that we're pushing the boundaries and we're helping end prohibition, because a lot of the companies out there, in fact, still today, are too afraid to talk about it. Mm-hmm. And so from there, we were able to have patients that we used as labs. We also have donated about 1.23, I don't know, I stopped counting, it's way over $1 million of equipment and nutrients. We have what we call our Cannabis Care program for people who can't afford it. I can't remember one instance in our company's history where we have turned down a sick patient or a patient that doesn't have enough financial resources and to help them out with the nutrients. And from there, we slowly went into the United States. And at some point, I heard that the Bulgarian Academy of Science is getting ready to lay off all these like really brilliant scientists. So I said, okay, let's go over there and let's talk to them. And it was a bit of a challenge in the beginning, but we found some good ones. And from there, we were able to grow our R&D team. And the Bulgarian government also gave us a license to grow cannabis for research purposes. So we've had that for the last 9 years. We've had a lab there. Yeah.
Now, of course, and your family background, you had a mother and dad who were from Estonia and Latvia.
Correct.
You had seen those countries blossom after the Soviet Union released them from the oppression that was there. You assumed the same thing would be happening in Bulgaria.
Yeah.
And then you went there and you found something completely different.
Stone Age. Yeah. It was like Estonia was literally only like a couple or 3 years after Estonia got its freedom. This is what Bulgaria looked like. I said, well, I know this look, but this isn't what it should be looking like. What's going on here? And based on that, I started digging and looking. And then I started a charity there because there was no charity. And people told me, don't do it. Don't waste your time. You don't understand Bulgarian. Every excuse in the book you could get. I even had the Bulgarian Red Cross trying to stop me from doing it. Wow. And I'm going like, what's going on here? And so we did it anyways. In 3 weeks, we created the charity, and we fed the last family. It was 5,000 it was 5,000 needy Bulgarians the first year that we did it. We're in our third year, and we've had 26,000 Bulgarians, almost 26,000 Bulgarians over this last Christmas, and we're getting ready to do it again for this Easter. And as I dug down more and more, I saw this corruption. I go like, why are these people allowing this to go on? What's going on here? And and I'm still peeling back layers of the onion, and it just gets uglier and uglier. And what it comes down to, you have an extremely corrupt government. Like in America, a lot of rich guys get into politics to kind of help people. They make their money in business and they get into politics. In Bulgaria, they don't have any money and they get into politics to get rich.
Yeah.
And that's the huge problem. And so these guys are ripping off literally billions of dollars every year from the Bulgarian society and putting it in their pockets, and no one's doing anything about it. And all kinds of other problems are being created about it. We have an ISIS problem. We have a Putin problem.
People need to understand in America that this is something that can happen here. We already see the beginning of the trend happening here, in the sense that people are losing, the economy is collapsing in so many different areas except for the government. I was just talking to loggers up in Oregon, and all the mills are closing. The only buildings that are being built are government buildings by the Forestry Department, by the BLM. That's how this all is going to go, the way of Bulgaria. So you're there. Kevin Booth does a documentary. We're going to play a trailer for that in just a moment. The working title of this is Ghost Nation. And we want to talk to Ivan, who has actually lived under this, to tell us what is happening there, to give us a picture of where we're headed in this country unless we stop the metastasizing government that is taking over everything in this country and shutting down all of our freedoms. And of course, it all began with the war on drugs. Then it goes to the war on terror. Then it just metastasizes to everything, including controlling the Western lands and taking the property from the people who are working and farming and logging and mining out there, taking away their rights that they've had for over 100 years. Everything being drawn into the government. So let's take a quick look at this trailer, and then we're going to come back and talk about what is going on in Bulgaria. We'll be right back.
The corruption in Bulgaria is the reason that we are so poor.
В България нямаме нормални банки, т.е. нямаме банкери, нямаме банкстери.
The politicians were trying to make us be invisible. All the media were saying there are 300 to 500 people, while there were thousands. I mean, tens of thousands. I'll tell my kids to tell you if something happens to me.
Те винаги са се страхували за мен, когато кажа аз отивам на протест.
We don't have capitalism and democracy, we have the mafia.
Just guy home, your media here. Just
Директно го казвам това нещо. От престъпници, криминални.
Според мен не може да се направи извод, че запалванията, които последваха, са резултат.
There is a very strong threat coming from Russia. Also, we shouldn't forget about ISIS. Only one country is between ISIS and Bulgaria, it's Turkey.
To stop the flow of terrorists. Maybe we are doing this, but we must do more. Who is killing, who is attacking, who is assaulting without any reason or with any reason, it doesn't matter.
The threat of direct terror attack is so strong in Bulgaria.
And what they did was, as soon as they started attack, they start to spread their videos over the internet and start to spread their propaganda.
News for you out of Paris, France. Several people have been killed. A shooting in central Paris.
Tell me what you know.
That I know that at least 10 ISIS fighters have been caught coming across the Mexican border in Texas.
It's almost the state of anarchy here.
I don't know if I will brave, but I'm very angry. I will become more and more angry.
They have no badges. No, they don't. You have a badge, you must be this guy. He doesn't. He's not a policeman, he's not a cop. You're not a cop.
If Western civilization is not awake, it's a problem.
You just saw the trailer for Ghost Nation. That's the working title of a new documentary by Kevin Booth, no stranger to those of you who are Infowars viewers. Also joining us is Ivan Georgiev and Michael Straumietis, also known as Big Mike. And all of these people converge now. Let's take the story to Bulgaria, okay? This is a long story. We've been talking these last couple of segments, how you began in Canada. As things began to legalize, you saw an opportunity in Eastern Europe, especially Bulgaria. Scientists were available there. The government was amenable to working with you. And Kevin Booth is doing a documentary there. I assume you guys got together on the earlier How the West Was Won documentary. Okay, so you know each other. Yeah. So he calls you in. And now let's talk about what's going on in Bulgaria. Because this, I believe, is the path on which that America is on, where essentially everything is owned. It's kind of a gangster mafia environment where the government has total control over everyone, essentially what was the Soviet Union was like, but it really hasn't come out of it like some of the other countries like Latvia and Estonia. Tell us about Bulgaria, Ivan.
So basically, just a quick summary is like, as an example, so the government and particular business, their business associates actually own 90% of all media. Mm-hmm. So you just, if anything, if the truth comes out, they just cover it up. They don't mention it. They just starts just pointing to the finger to the other direction or stuff like that. It's like crazy. And all the time that what we're having is young people, educated people are leaving the country. Mm-hmm. So we were 9 million under communist rule. We are now 7.
Ah.
So 2 million Bulgarians just left.
That's one of the story threads in the film. We're showing like how the kids with money leave and all the kids that don't have money are forced to stay in the country.
Wow. Wow. So we have the same situation here to some degree. So it's a difference of degrees essentially in that we have a handful of media companies that control everything, work very tightly with the political leaders to control the narrative, yet we have had the internet and alternative media that have come in to open things up, and that's resulted in the kind of anti-establishment candidacies that we've seen from Donald Trump, from Ben Carson, from Bernie Sanders, people who are challenging the establishment, challenging the controlled narrative, but you're not having that in Bulgaria.
No, we have it actually. I mean, we have the controlled narrative. All the medias are part of the mob. Mm-hmm. In the corrupt government. So I call them the mob, the government.
No, but I mean about the alternative media. I mean, what is the situation?
The alternative media is great. We have been making progress the last 3 years only because of internet. Mm-hmm. I mean, like Big Mike started this platform, Facebook. It's huge. It's close to a 250,000 people. For Bulgaria, this is big. Mm-hmm. It's like Facebook page that people can come in and tell what the problems that they have. So, and again, I mean, it's like...
So this is like a Bulgarian Facebook that you created, Big Mike?
It's a movement we created called Political Change Now.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Great.
It has a biggest fan base at the moment, even compared to the political parties. Mm-hmm. And they control all the media. So everything is controlled, starting from the Ministry of Internal Affairs. You have the judicial system completely corrupted and controlled. You have the prosecutor's office controlling the judges and the police. Mm-hmm. And you have people on the streets protesting all the time because we kind of have the strongest social movement that we ever had in the country the last 25 years. Like people, young people, and not young, people from all ages just go out the street and say no more. We want to change that. So and again, I mean the guys that are currently ruling, they're the former bodyguards and relatives of the former communist leaders. Come on, our prime minister is the former bodyguard of the guy that ruled us for 45 years. That's how.
Of course, the key to this, of course, to be able to bring people together is the information, the internet, and a documentary, for example. That's why I'm really anxious to see your documentary, because I think most Americans don't realize that we are headed on this same path, the same kind of control. And if we lose control of the internet, and there's a lot of ways that they're trying to control the internet, trying to watch everything we're doing. We've talked many times to William Binney, former head of the NSA, who said that he spent his lifetime watching Eastern Europe, watching the Soviet Union. And he says, we have exactly the same infrastructure created now in America. We will go that direction unless we see what has happened in Eastern Europe.
Yeah, I mean, this is absolutely a cautionary tale. Mm-hmm. And some people would say, well, why Bulgaria? It's such a little country. Why does it matter? But for us, it's a really interesting story that hasn't been told before. And this little tiny country has been somewhat bullied all these years with these huge neighbors, Turkey to the south and Russia to the north. And now, you know, the West is coming in and it's a cautionary tale of what could happen to us.
And it was absolutely amazing to see in that trailer people who are doing self-immolation and everything. It's what we've heard from Gerald Celente. When people lose everything, they lose it. Yeah. And you're at the point now, it seems like in Bulgaria, where people will do anything to stop this tyranny. And we want to try to be able to certainly wish you the best there, but we want people in America to stop it before it gets to that stage, to see the logical conclusion of what happens with these controls.
And hopefully people in America too will realize, you know, it is one world, and hopefully people in America could help support the people of Bulgaria in some way to get involved on whatever level that they can.
Because there's a lot at stake there, a lot at stake. People go Bulgaria, but Bulgaria, the border between Bulgaria and Turkey is a demarcation line between Islam and Christianity.
Yes.
the East and the West.
Yes.
It's the gateway to hell for EU and us if we do not take care of what's going on in Bulgaria.
Very important to see this documented. Again, it's Ghost Nation. Thank you so much for joining us, gentlemen. Kevin Booth, Ivan Georgiev, and Big Mike. We'll leave it at that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We believe in win-win, folks, treating people like we want to be treated. That's why we develop nutraceuticals with Dr. Group and other top researchers, chemists, scientists, you name it. He's one of our advisors to come up with products like Anthroplex that is an original product that he made just for us. And this is a base system to make super male or super female vitality work even better. It is natural. It just helps get your body pumping and going in the way you need to be going. And Dr. Group is here till we go to break to tell us about the latest product at InfoWarsLife.com, Anthroplex, that out of the gates, and we do this all the time with a new product, we discount it out of the gates to get you to try it, knowing that you're going to love it. It'll sell out. So InfoWarsLife.com, Anthroplex, 15% off and free shipping for the next 2 days only when you get it with super male or female vitality. Let's go to Dr. Group. Why do you call this the foundation to start the fire, and then the super male takes you to the next level?
Well, we just look at the base problem that's going on right now in all over the world, which is the endocrine disrupting chemicals, the amount of estrogen that men have, the femininity of men, and what's going on even in children right now with low testosterone levels, low sperm count levels, and the problems that in the attack that we're seeing on the endocrine systems of both male and female. So I'm always looking for ways to boost that and to make it more effective and naturally get the body to start producing these hormones and balancing themselves. So what we decided to do was, how can we add a few other components in there that would actually boost the effectiveness of the super male vitality and at the same time address different issues that the male might have, so it would be a full approach. And one of those was zinc. And zinc is actually necessary for the production of testosterone. There's more and more studies coming out that zinc is essential for hormone balancing.
What is in the goat weed? You've got one of the purest, strongest organic forms of it. What's so magic about the goat weed?
Well, the horny goat weed was given that name because years ago in India, they noticed that a certain time of the year, this weed would grow and the goats would eat it and they would just go crazy with all the female goats. So that's how it was developed. It's called epimedium. And what that's been proven to do over thousands of years is increase sexual pleasure, help balance the male hormones. It can actually be used for women as well. But it really kind of resets and brings the hormone balance, improves sperm motility, and increases testosterone levels.
So it counters the stuff they've been throwing at us. Results will vary overall. All I know is dynamite. I mean, absolutely dynamite with the stamina, with the weightlifting, with the swimming. Folks, the new product is available. Anthroplex, available at InfoWarsLife.com. Dr. Group, thank you for developing this amazing product.
Thank you.